I always like to come here to Vienna because this is one of my favorite cities in the world. I think I've been here 10 times or 15 times. And actually, I've already talked about this Pius Skåne twice here in Vienna before, but that was mainly for an international participants. Ich spreche auch Deutsch, aber es ist leichter für mich in Englisch zu sprechen. Aber später können Sie mit mir in Deutsch sprechen. Ja? Ich verstehe alles, aber es ist ein bisschen schwer, Ihre Sprache zu sprechen, weil die Grammatik so schwer ist und der Satzbau so kompliziert ist in Deutsch. Aber ich verstehe, glaube ich, alles, wenn Sie nicht so schnell sprechen. Wienerisch-Deutsch ist ein bisschen schwer, wenn Sie schnell sprechen, aber ich versuche, wenn Sie not so schnell. And now I speak in English. I will tell you a little about our service, Personal Ombudsman, and I will first use the presentation I usually do. I have it written down because it's usually I like to speak more like this, but then I miss a lot of details. So I have one, but I will add, because we have more time now. Sometimes I have only 15 minutes to speak. So I have more time now. I could add something. And I will also show you, if the technology is working, a film, which will be about 30 minutes long. It's the first time it will be shown at the conference. It's quite a new film. It's not made by us, but made by the Mental Health Europe, which is one of the oldest and largest NGO on the European level, Mental Health Europe in Brussels. They were there in August last autumn for 1 week and filmed and interviewed. And now, it was quite recently the film was finished, edited. So it will be the premiere. But you can also find it on YouTube already. Anyway, I will add, usually I have only this, as I said, 15 to 20 minutes to speak. And in this short time, I cannot cover everything, which means that there is a lot of questions still. I think about this because I have read in the invitation to this conference, there's a link to a paper written by Meyerhofer, I think, in the Rechtsinstitut, or so it was. And she is presenting these two Swedish, which you have translated, the mentor and the personal ombudsman. The problem is that I come from Sweden and no one reads Swedish. So they say they only make this personal ombudsman is presented everywhere in books and magazines and all over the world. But it's mainly based on what I have been said or written in books myself. And they say that like in this paper there are not much research done, but actually there are hundreds of research. And you can find it on the National Health Board of Sweden, but it's in Swedish. So people don't know it. So I will tell you a little about some of these findings later. And there are especially two questions that are often arise, which is not really mentioned in my presentation. One is about the economy. How much does it cost? And there you have a very detailed analysis, which I have brought with me in Swedish. Very detailed by national economists. Very detailed, and which shows that it's not the cost. The government saves 17 euro. For every euro they spend on this peer service, the government will save 17 euros. And it's a very detailed economic analysis. So it's really good business. And this is a very good arguments when you're talking with the politicians, because that is what they want to know. How much does it cost? How much shall we spend? They are not spending, they are saving a lot of money. Really a lot of money. I hope this will be translated into English so people could read this study and they will see it. And the other thing which is often asked me is about what is called the safeguards, which is also mentioned in this Article 12 of the UN Convention. So I'll tell you a little about that. Because I also in this paper said, we don't know if there are any safeguards about this PO system because, well, we cannot find them in Swedish. So now, first I start with the presentation I usually make. So I will tell you a little about our service PO Skåne, which we started in 1995. It has become well known all over the world, especially in connection with the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the CRPD. Our service is, for example, presented in the World Report on Disability, published by the World Health Organization and the World Bank in 2011. But our service started 10 years before the UN Convention was adopted, in another context, namely the experience of us who are users and survivors of psychiatry and our ideas of the support we think we might need in certain situations. It's hard to translate our Swedish word personligt ombud into English. The most accurate translation is probably personal agent, but I usually translate it as personal ombudsman to be able to use the same abbreviation in English as in Swedish, namely PO. And personal ombudsman has now become the established translation, figuring already in thousands of international texts. Before I go into detail about our PO service, I will tell you a little about its connection with the UN Convention, as this gives a clear idea of what the personal ombudsman is all about. In January 2006, I presented the PO Skåne in the UN headquarters in New York. It was in a so-called side event during the lunch break of the ad hoc committee which was preparing the CRPD. There were usually 3 or 4 such side events during the lunch break between the 2 daily sessions, and they were part of the official program. Our side event was organized jointly by the World Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry, Mind Freedom International and Inclusion International, and was sponsored by the state of Canada. The hall was overcrowded, which meant that many of the UN ambassadors couldn't find a chair. They had to sit on the floor to listen to us 6 speakers. And one of the other speakers was Michael Bach, so it was the first time we met. It was, 9 years ago. The purpose of our side event was to convince the state delegates of the necessity of making a radical paradigm shift when coming to Article 12 of the Convention, the article on legal capacity. Besides arguing from a human rights perspective in a theoretical way, we thought that we also had to present some practical examples of supported decision-making to show that this is possible also for persons with the most severe psychosocial and intellectual disabilities. We had to combat the argument of guardianship as a last resort. We have already heard a lot of this concept, the last resort here, for this very difficult group, by showing for concrete examples that guardianship and other forms of substituted decision-making aren't necessary. Well, this about the last resort. We know, at least from the psychiatric field, that last resort is usually not at all the last resort, but the first resort. Every text say that very few people in a very special circumstances could be put on the guardianship or under forced psychiatric treatment. But in reality, it's not so. When this possibility is in the law, it's used very much. It's so easy and it's so convenient for the practitioners to use this. And I talked also in the plenary session with all the state delegates who was preparing the convention, and I said that I think it's very strange to make a convention on the rights of all human beings, all people with disabilities, but to deny a little group and say this human right is for everybody. We don't matter what sex or religion or race or whatever, or what the disability. It's a right for everybody. But there is a little group of some people who we don't want to guarantee this right for, because they should still have guardianship and for psychiatric treatment. So we were combating this. The responses from the audience were overwhelming. The state delegates were very enthusiastic about our peer service, although they didn't know whether it was possible to implement something like that in their own countries. I remember especially the head of the disability unit at the US Ministry of Justice, who came to me after my presentation and said, "This is very good, but that is Sweden. You have money for that kind of things. I don't think it's possible here in America." So they still think it's a country like Sweden where you have very high taxes, so the state have a lot of money who can afford this kind of luxury things. But as I have already told you, it's really not a cost, but it's a saving of money. Anyway, our side event had its effect. In the afternoon session, the ad hoc committee discussed Article 12, and suddenly the paradigm shift occurred when the delegates, after hard discussion, came to the conclusion that substituted decision-making is degrading the personhood of the disabled person and against the purpose and meaning of the whole convention, and therefore must be replaced by supported decision-making. Subsequently, the text of Article 12 was changed into the final version we now have. Now, you have already talked about legal capacity, so I jump a bit here. As personal ombudsman is a concrete example of supported decision-making. There is a great interest in this model now, when many countries are considering the option of abolishing the old guardianship systems. And because of this, I have presented our service in a range of European cities, like Oslo, Copenhagen, Brussels, Berlin, Alsace, Vienna, Lisbon, Florence, Ljubljana, Sofia, Budapest, Prague, and Riga. Actually, also here, before I go into details about how the PO service works, I will go back to its very beginning in 1995. The Swedish system with personal ombudsmen came out of the Swedish psychiatric reform in 1995. The committee preparing the reform had noticed that something essential was missing concerning the support persons with psychiatric problems received from society. The municipalities had developed quite good programs for housing, rehabilitation, supported employment, and so on. But nevertheless, the support for persons with severe psychosocial disabilities didn't work very well. The parliamentary committee came up with the idea of something completely new, which they called personal ombudsman. But they had only a very vague idea what this should be. They thought that there should be someone who could help persons with severe psychosocial disabilities to get what they needed and wanted, but not much more. In order to develop this new idea, the Parliament decided to finance 10 projects with personal ombudsmen in the course of 3 years. They discussed a lot about who should be the principals for those new services. Some thought it should be the government, but others that the service must be run by independent organizations to avoid the conflict of interest. The personal ombudsmen were compared with lawyers who must be independent to be able to defend their clients. Because of these conflicting opinions, the Parliament decided that different models for the PO services, with different principals running them, should be tried during the project period 1995 to 1998. When I heard about this, I thought this was a good chance for us to develop a PO model of our own. I wrote an application for project funding, and our project was one of the 10 projects selected, although the National Health Board had received hundreds of applications. Our project was one of 2 that had a service user organization as its principal. All the other projects were run by local governments. This new idea of personal ombudsmen fitted very well into my own experience and thinking. I have not enough time to tell you about this now, but some of you might already have heard some of my earlier presentations on these subjects in various countries. or read the printed versions of them in English and German books. I'm thinking, for example, of my alternative model called the Jungle Model, which I presented for the first time at the Congress of the World Association for Social Psychiatry in Hamburg in 1994, and which is published in the book Abschied from Babylon. Or our user-run hotel, Magnus Stenbock, which I presented in many European cities and wrote articles about in several international books. Actually, you who presented me, since the beginning of the 90s, I've been talking many hundreds of international conferences, but twice I've been ill, and one was this time I was invited to Vienna to talk about our hotel. But my friend Peter Lehmann, who was here, he read my paper, and it's printed also in German in the book you have published from this LOK. So you can read about the hotel also in an Austrian book. When we started our PO service in 1995, we only had 2 POs, and me as the project manager. The project period 1995 to 1998, which was researched thoroughly by 2 researchers appointed by the National Health Board, showed extremely good results, both in qualitative and quantitative outcomes, and as I told you, also in economic outcomes. Actually, this project was the only element of the psychiatric reform of 1995 that could show any success. This led to a decision by the Swedish Parliament in year 2000 to support the development of personal ombudsmen in the whole country, still with different principles running the services, as the Parliament still couldn't decide which model was the best. Actually, there was a proposal for a law written in the year 2000, but because they still had this division about how it would be managed, and it was the National Health Board who was the main consultant to the minister, who had divided opinions within themselves. So the law was postponed to the future, and it's still postponed. So we don't have a law for the rights of personal ombudsmen, but it's the meaning. The Parliament decided it should be developed for the whole country, and we are waiting for this law to be implemented or decided in the Parliament in the future. As the PO now had become a permanent service, and with much wider spread than during the project period 1995 to 1998, we also decided to reorganize our own service. Until then, our service with 2 POs was run by our regional user organization, RSM Skåne, which is the Skåne district of the Swedish National Association for Social and Mental Health. But in 1999, we asked the regional family organization, IVS Skåne, the Skåne district of the Schizophrenia Fellowship, if they would join us. And in the year 2000, we jointly founded the new organization, PO Skåne, which means Personal Ombudsman in Skåne. Now I will tell you a little about how the POs work in practice. As the time is short, I will use bullet points to address the main features of the service. A PO, a personal ombudsman, is a professional, highly skilled person who works to 100% on the commission of his clients only. Not on 97% or 98% or 99%, but on 100%. The PO is in no alliance with psychiatry or the social services or any other authority, and not with the client's relatives or any other person in his surroundings. The PO does only what his client wants him to do. As it can take a long time, sometimes several months, before the client knows and dares to tell what kind of help he wants, the PO has to wait, even though a lot of things are chaotic and in a mess. So that is one of the things we have to teach the new POs. When new POs are employed, they are training with seminars and lectures and so on, and they have a mentor, an old PO. So they have to be trained not to act, because most of them have been working as social workers before, and they think they should act. But they have to learn not to act if a client doesn't want. I mean, they have to accept that their apartment is in a mess. Or we ask them, if you are invited, there is nothing in the apartment, and they cook the food, some tea in a little field kitchen on the floor, and invite you to tea, do you accept that? And if they said, oh yes, I could do that, then they could be employed as a PO. So they must really accept not to intervene. And this also means that the PO has to develop a long-time engagement for his clients, usually for several years. This is a necessary condition for developing a trustful relation and for coming into more essential matters. In our service with personal ombudsmen, the most important thing has been to develop ways to work which are adjusted to this special group of persons with mental health problems of the most difficult kind. In other projects, it is usually the clients who have to adjust themselves to a bureaucratic system, but we work in the opposite way. The POs have to be very flexible, creative, and unconventional in finding ways to work with this group. Well, I can mention some examples. I know most from the beginning, when I was most involved myself. For example, there was one client, or who would be a client, who didn't open the door to anybody, not to the social service, not to anybody at all. She didn't open to the PO either, so the PO had to be laying on the knees before the mail drop and talk through the mail drop for 1 month, have the communication through the mail drop. And after 1 month, this client opened the door and let the PO inside her apartment. But he had to sit just inside the door on a stool. But there was no one who has ever come into that apartment before. And I remember another person we had. It was a homeless man who was living on a bench, actually outside the state authority building in Malmö, just outside where the authorities were working. He was lying there for months, and a lot of people had tried to approach him, but he didn't answer anybody. So they didn't even know if he understood Swedish or if he was a foreigner, because he didn't answer anybody at all. So our PO tried to get into touch with this man, and when she first approached him, he didn't answer either. But then she noticed that this man was collecting empty, I think it's tin cans in English, the little cans, isn't it? And so she started to do the same, the PO. She started to go to the waste baskets around there and collect them. And he noticed it, and he began to have a talk with her. So he began to talk about this, how you collect these cans. And then she asked him if he wanted her to buy some bread and sausage for him. And he said, yes, you can do that. And so that is the way she started to approach him, get in contact, and develop a relation. And it worked. And nobody had ever heard any word from this man before. He understood Swedish very well. He was Swedish. I will briefly introduce some preconditions which we think are necessary if you really want to reach these persons and practice supported decision-making with them. The PO doesn't work Monday to Friday at office hours only. The week has 7 days and each day 24 hours. And the PO must be prepared to work all these various hours because their clients' problems are not concentrated to office hours. And some clients are more easy to contact in evenings and weekends. The PO has to work 40 hours a week, but makes up a flexible working scheme every week according to the wishes of the clients. The PO hasn't got any office because office is power. The PO works from his own home with the help of telephone and internet, and he meets his clients in their home or at neutral places out in town. The PO works primarily according to a relationship model. As many clients are very suspicious or hostile or hard to reach because of other reasons. For example, that they talk only in a very symbolic language, which is hard to understand. The PO has to go out and find them where they are, and then he has to try to reach them through several steps. 1, making contact. 2, developing a communication. 3, establishing a relation. 4, starting a dialogue. 5, getting commissions. Each of these steps can take a long time to realize. Just to get contact can sometimes take several months. Not until a relation is established and a dialogue has started can the PO start getting commissions from his client. There should be no bureaucratic procedure to get a PO. If a form had to be signed or an admission note be necessary, many psychiatric patients would back out and not get the PO, and it would probably be the persons who need a PO most. To get the PO from PO Skåne doesn't involve any formal procedure. After a relation is established, the PO just asks, "Do you want me to be your PO?" If the answer is yes, the whole thing is settled. And it could be cancelled just as easily. If I don't want you anymore, then it's finished. The PO should be able to support the client in all kinds of matters. And the priorities of the client are usually not the same as the priorities of the authorities or their relatives. According to 10 years of experience, the client's first priorities are usually not housing or occupation, but existential matters. Like, why should I live? Why has my life become a life of a mental patient? Have I any hope for a change? Sexuality, which is in the mind of almost everybody, but nobody in psychiatry talk about it. And problems with relatives. A PO must be able to spend a lot of time talking with their clients also about these kind of issues and not just fix things. A PO should be well skilled to be able to argue effectively for the client's rights in front of various authorities or in court. All POs of PO Skåne have some kind of academic degree from the university or some similar education. Most of them are trained social workers, but some are lawyers and some have other specialized training. The client has a right to be anonymous for the authorities. If he doesn't want his PO to tell anybody that he has a PO, this must be respected. PO Skåne gets money from the municipality for the service, but there's a paragraph in the contract that says that the PO should deny to tell the name of the clients to the community, to the government. And actually in Malmö, the biggest city in our region, we also have succeeded to get an agreement very unique with the health authorities that the clients, mainly homeless people, doesn't have to tell their personal number to the doctors. I mean, I suppose you have the same here in Austria. You have some number, some code that everybody have, and you usually have to tell everybody about that. And when you go to the hospital, you have the first thing they ask you and to write into the computer. But actually, you have accepted to receive some of our clients without telling their number, so they don't know who they are. The PO doesn't keep any records. All papers belong to the client. When the relation is terminated, the PO has either to give all papers to the client or burn them together with the client. No paper and no notes will remain with the PO. So we don't make any records, but of course the PO has to make copies, for example, if they make a complaint or go to the court or to the complaint to the social service or so, they have to make copies of the letters and so on. But when the relation is ended, they destroy it. They give it to the client or destroy it. So it's nothing left. I think I will add some things now before the video. And we also have a discussion later when you can ask. And I got from the organizers whole page of questions. And if I answer them, it will take the whole day. Some of them are very, very general, like what is the main problem with the UN Convention in Sweden. So that is 4 hours presentation. But anyway, I will tell you a little more about things which I have left out here. First, about the economy. This is still, as I already told you, the parliament has still not made a law around this. So it's not, the local municipalities are not forced to have this service. But the state is spending a lot of money on it. So there's a subsidy from the state, which already from the year 2000 and still continuing, while the state is paying about half the cost of it, of the service. I mean, these are people who are full-time employed, so it costs some money. And it's only the local governments who can get the money from the state. But they can choose to have this person ombudsman themselves or to ask an NGO, not a profit-driving private company, but a non-profit organization. To calculate them have it, then they give the money. They receive half of the sum from the state, and the local government put the half of it. So we have these contracts with in Skåne, which is the most southern province of Sweden, which is about 1.1 million inhabitants. Well, you know, we are a small country when it comes to populations. We're only 9 million, but quite huge as a geographical, not like Canada. But in European, I take the opportunity to tell you a little bit, learn you a little bit about Sweden, because you don't know about that. But if you go from the most southern point in Sweden, where I live, to the most northern point, which is above the Arctic Circle, if you go southward the same distance, all over Europe will become south of Napoli. So that is the length of Sweden. It's the whole length of Europe. But in this big area, we're only 9 million people, and 1/9 of them is living in my province in the south, where it's warmest, most warm. We have contracts with about, the PO Skåne have contracts with about, I think, 11 municipalities. And the contracts are usually for 2 or 3 years, and then they're renewed. So we get the money, and the contracts are very open, so they are not detailed. We should deliver this service, it says, but it's not very much controlling it. And we have, I told you a little about that. Our PO Skåne was developed by 2 NGOs together, the youth organization and the family organization. And we make up the board of the PO Skåne, which is, it's elected like an ordinary organization and the annual general meeting once a year. And but we have the chair is also elected by this annual general meeting, but we have chosen to quite a professional person as a chair, very good person, so the chair of the board. Then, which is not mentioned in that paper, because the paper of this Meyerhofer here miss this. I think that it's only, and it's because of my lack of information. It's because mainly only the person ombudsman and the board. But actually, we have between them we have the very important position of the director, who is really the person who is working full time, and the professional director who is working, who have the daily contact with the person ombudsman. And it's also a very skilled and professional person. So when it comes to this safeguards against abuse and exploitation and so on, of course, first there is this internal control. The director has daily contact and knows much of what is going on, and the clients could complain. But there is also the state has a local authority. Now I don't know the English word for this. It's called länsstyrelse in Swedish, and it will be translated as the county board. But it's actually not a board, it's a huge authority. But it's a state, it's not the regional, it's not a county It's not the body of the county, but the county of the state. It's since 200 years, the state want to control all the counties in Sweden, so they have put up this, so they control us. And there are different departments in this authority. And one of them, there's the department for controlling the environmental issues and about controlling that you're not destroying old buildings and a lot of other things. But there are also some officials working with this monitoring and controlling this personal ombudsman. It's the same officials who are also controlling, for example, private nursing homes. And they have the authority to intervene, so they are not just giving an opinion or so. They can stop a service which is abusive. They can actually really can intervene and say, no, this is too bad, we close it. So there is a range of monitoring of safeguards. And also because the POs work with their clients so close with the local government, because lots of the service they want is provided by the local community. The local government knows a lot about what's going on. If there is something abusive or something not working, they would react. So it's a little about the safeguards. I also want to say something more about this paper, because I was also presenting the other system in Sweden, which you also mentioned shortly, but it's not really correct. Here it's called mentor. It's called in Swedish good man. And actually it's two levels. There is one level above, which is actually guardianship. So we don't have a plenary guardianship in Sweden. It was abolished, I think 30 years ago or something like that. But we have a partial guardianship. And I have actually myself been both a guardian to one of our members and also been what we call mentor. So I know it from that side also. It was actually one of our members who wanted to get rid of his guardian. And he couldn't get rid of the decision by the court, but he could change the guardian. And he asked me, couldn't you be my guardian, just to show up? I said, yes, I could do that. So we went to the court and they changed it to me. Because he said that the guardian he had, it was the devil himself. So I know, but what is written here about the mentor and is presented in many other texts is not really correct. The good man is not really a supported decision-making. It's actually explicitly saying in the law about that they could act against the will of the clients. It's a very low form of guardianship. Mostly they do it in, you have to deal, but you can do, it really says so in the law that you could act against the will. And in practice, it's very badly used. I mean, those which call good men, they are usually often not at all have any dialogue with the clients. It's often social workers or nurses, and they have, or some lawyers, and they have 20, 30 clients, and they are just paying the bills, have no contact. It's really bad, often. Now, I will show the film, I hope. If it works. So this is the first time it will be shown on a conference. In the film you will see some personal ombudsmen. There's also two clients. It's not the most difficult clients because then they have to stay there for some months if they are going to film that. So they are the two women here in the film. They are good in speaking English, and they look very well. But I know one of them very well, and she has a very hard time every year. Forced treated. Just recently she had a new serious VCT, but here in the film she looks very capable of talking for herself. And there is also some of us from the board and one legal expert. Or you do it. I'll blow it up.
I will do it.
You learn a lot and you meet fantastic people. You learn a lot and you meet fantastic people all the time, and it's fun to fight for something good, you know. and I think it's a very special, because everyone who works in psychiatric things or in social service, everyone wants to do good, but I think this is the only work that you can have that you actually go from your home in the morning and you only do good.
My name is Mats Jespersson. I'm a psychiatric survivor. 20 years ago, I've been for 2 years in an old mental hospital. But I cured myself. There was no help from psychiatry at all. For me, it was something which suited very well my own experience in what you need. You need a person, one person who is very close to you and who is 100% on your side. Not 98%, not 99%, but 100%, completely.
The personal ombudsman system is a system where persons, professionals, help persons with a history of mental illness to achieve their goals in the community or in their life, actually. The persons with a history of mental illness choose which changes they'd like to make in their lives, and our mission is to support them to reach their own life goals. Someone would like to change their housing situation, their working environment, their family situation. Some persons would like to have a loved one, to start a family. Someone would like to have friends. Some persons do have a problem with banks or authorities and need to have a legal issues sorted out. That's why we're there.
I'm that kind of person who have a hard time to ask people for help. So it felt very strange when I called Hans Westerlund, who's my personal man, ombud. I got contact with him through, I was from the psychiatry, but when you are indoor, I had a period and everything was a mess with studies, income, everything, because when you study, you don't have you don't have income from social society system, because you only get money for those days you should be in work. But when you are study and working on hours, you don't know for many days when you're going to work. So practically I don't have any income at all when I'm studying and work at the same time. So I ran out of money and I needed help to guide in the system how to do.
He has been so helpful to me. He follows me if I have an appointment, if there is anything I can tell him, and he will assist me to the government or the places that I've been going. So it has been good help. And actually when I was so down and I was at the hospital, he came around. He asked you, what do you feel? How are you doing here? Do you think it's quite okay for you to be here? I mean, he's there for me when I need him. If anything, I can turn to him and he will help me.
There is no formal way to get a PO, personal ombudsman. Usually they try themselves to reach out, to find people, even go out and find them on the streets. And they have sometimes a long period when they just connect. And then at that one moment they ask this person if, do you want me to be your PO, your personal ombudsman? And if this person say yes, it's settled. And then the PO starts getting commissions from this client. It could be what this person wants to have, what kind of help he or she wants to have, which could be just everything from having problem with their home, with their relatives, wanting to have friends, wanting to have something to do, wanting to have no medicines anymore, wanted to get a lawyer, whatever.
A client who was badly wanted to have a dog, so we were looking on websites trying to find a dog.
When I was so sick and my children in a bed, I couldn't go because I was really down. He took me there and bought the bed and they brought it home for me. So for me it has been very much helpful to me that I can trust and rely on him if I'm in need.
I am not appointed by the city council. It's all based on trust. So if she wants my help, I help her. So I have no authority to do anything against her will. And I don't do anything against or behind her back or anything. So it's all open.
It made me feel I become to trust him, and I sometimes have hard to trust other people, especially when they're supposed to help me.
Yeah, when we started it in '95, it was before this Convention on Human Rights, the UN Convention. So it was out of another context. But we have already from the beginning, one of the starting points was that we should change the power balance between the clients and people around him or her, because this person is also put down, and they have all these features around them, that family members, psychiatrists, nurses, social workers. Sometimes they are in a meeting and they are alone and they have 10 people who tell them, him or her, what he should do. So one of the ideas from Wien was to help a little to change the power balance so there's more power to the client. And later when I was taking part in this preparing of the convention, this came up, this concept of supported decision making around 2005, 2006, and we saw immediately that this fit into this concept, which means that it's that you don't take the decision making away from the person. It stays there, it remains there, but the person might need some help to express, to formulate in words, first of all, what they want, and to communicate it sometimes to others.
No, he does not make any decision, but he helps me or supports me in the decisions that I want to take.
The difference between a guardian and a personal ombudsman is that the guardian is taking the decision making away from you. So the decision making is not staying at you, it's taking away and placed to another person. And this person makes the decisions. He can make decisions who are against your own will. Usually he should have a conversation, of course, but he can make decision totally opposite your own. So that is the difference. But when you have a personal ombudsman, the decision making is staying with the person like this, and the personal ombudsman is just supporting this person to formulate it or to communicate it.
The basic idea in guardianship is that you appoint a person who takes decision for the third person. So if you have a psychosocial disability, guardianship, the guardian is the one who takes all the decisions for you, and you cannot take any decisions yourself. The evidence that is out there when you talk to people that have been under guardianship shows a lot of negative effects. Is being deprived of all your decision-making authority it's very disempowering. It's a feeling of helplessness, it's a feeling of not having any control of your life, which is not very beneficial especially if you're already not feeling well. Supported decision-making is very much as it sounds, so you get support to make decisions. So the big difference between guardianship and supported decision making is that the decision stays with the individual. So what the supporter does is not making decisions for someone, but actually helping the person, enabling the person to make decisions, him or herself.
Traditional mental health services constitutes by a group of professionals, in most systems nowadays well-meaning persons trying to define services for a group, a target group, what do they want, and then we try to identify and formulate and create an environment for them. But by personal ombudsman, we don't do that for them, we do it with them. We ask persons, what do you want? And it's not a group journey, it's an individual journey. Each individual counts.
Sometimes for me, because I can never make a decision against the will of my client, and of course sometimes it can be a bit frustrating when I in my mind think, oh, I know what this person needs, but they can't decide it. But then again, everyone else is working against my client, so then I can someone can be on the side of the client. Is very yet in this 2 years that I've been working with this, I have never worked with a person who is not able to. Everyone knows what they want, and a lot of them knows how to get there.
Me and my personal ombudsman, we didn't have to have any rules because we were reasonable persons. I felt I had the power to say anything I want to him.
So sometimes after a couple of years with a personal ombudsman, it often is a process where the change is taking place within the client suddenly, quite suddenly. When this person steps out of the old way of behavior and is in control of their life again. It's something that just happened by itself. The outcome is extraordinary. I mean, also both in quantitative terms, in economic terms, and also in qualitative terms. And many people have changed their lives completely.
Recovery is a personal and unique experience, and no one can arrange a recovery service. But what we can do with personal ombudsman and other services is to promote the individual recovery.
The first thing that happens when you get a personal ombudsman usually is that you almost doesn't need any psychiatric treatment anymore. It dropped down immediately like that. So it's very little days in hospital anymore.
Recovery means to me to be able to go back to what you're supposed to do. I was sometimes when people think people with mental illness, they are not able to work at all. And I always say that work is the most important thing you can do in your work if you're able to. Can't you just work some few times a week? Well, that's okay. But it's very important to be part of something and feel that you have a value.
Every euro you spend on a personal ombudsman, you save 17 euro for the state, for the government. So it's really an economic gain.
I have knowledge from my ombudsman. And without him and what he taught me, I wouldn't be able to do it by myself now.